Hi, I'm Matt Morris.
I'm Sarah Johnson.
And we have nothing
to bring.
That was better.
Professional. I can't believe.
Yeah. And we're only a few episodes in. So let's see. We're 3 episodes in. We've got people still listening to us, which is great.
Thank you.
People are joining us on YouTube and watching our shorts as well. Amazing. We picked up like 1,500 views on one of our shorts, which I think was quite incredible, really. People really are interested in Star Trek.
And actually, on that note, I've got text messages from my friend who wanted to have an in-depth conversation about, he felt that I was too dismissive of one of the episodes. And so we've had a really inordinate conversation, actually.
Yeah. You got some grief over Enterprise, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think you're too harsh on Enterprise. I get why people didn't like it at the time, and the pilot season was a bit sparse. But the 3rd season had probably best season arc in Star Trek history. There was an arc in DS9, but it was more the premise of the Dominion War and the Kardashians.
Kardashians, again, another alien race.
Nothing topped the Xindi War 3rd season of Enterprise. So, yeah, but also a mention of the Orville. I really like the Orville. And that's Seth MacFarlane's work, which I feel kind of does Star Trek almost better than Star Trek.
And we've said this before, haven't we? We said it a couple of times. It does Star Trek better than Star Trek.
Does Star Trek better than Star Trek.
Whilst being a comedy at the same time, which
really
is very
good.
Clever.
Yeah, it's really very good. So, yeah, I've got a lot of shtick for my anti-Enterprise escapade, so I'm going to watch it again at some point when I can get over the stupid shower scene.
Yes, which was, I think, something to do with unnecessary female nudity.
Yeah, it was just, and sweatiness, and it was just not, not okay.
Which, unfortunately, has become a hallmark of Star Trek, I feel.
Yeah, well, with the kind of costumes and things like that are overly tight and...
Yeah, absolutely. Has anything caught your eye this week in terms of education news?
Lots of stuff. I have written notes on such things. So things that have caught my eye. Ruth Lucas wrote an article in Schools Week about isolation, and that some secondary schools, not all of them, are isolating 1/5 of pupils at least once a year. And there's lots of sort of commentary about that. That was also followed by John Roberts, who we both know, in TESS, about inclusion drive seeks to cut suspensions and room removals. And that's linked, I think, to some of the differences work. And I actually went to the Included Ed conference on Saturday. So that's one thing. So should we start there before I go on to the other things that I've noticed?
You can. Is this the article that talks a lot about data that's been pulled from a particular...
Arthur.
I'm not going to... Well, I wasn't going to name it.
I named them.
Go.
Sorry.
That's fine. But it's been pulled from a particular MIS, hasn't it, the data?
Yeah, and I did wonder, because actually one of my thoughts was, when I looked at the fact that it was one data set, is I actually thought that there are other management information systems that might give a bigger picture. And wouldn't it have been nice if the management information systems worked together to give us a broader picture around around suspensions and isolations? Because we've only got part of the story, because not everybody uses that management information system. So I was going to kind of do a little bit of a cheeky asking to see if we could pull other data sets elsewhere, if I was able to do that, because that would be fascinating to see. And actually one of the things that was noticed was that academies were more likely to use isolation, or at least record isolation, compared to the kind of council-maintained schools. But it had lots of questions, I think. I think that's often what research does. It gives you more questions. Is it that academies are using isolation more frequently? And for those that are listening and may not know, because I do think we have people that don't just work in education. So isolation is when you are sent out of the classroom and you are sent, in theory, on your own, but you might not be on your own, into a room or a space in which you're taken out of class. So you might go to a specific room in the school, for example. And you might have to stay there. Sometimes I've heard of several weeks, several months sometimes, like quite a long time out of class. Sometimes it might just be for that afternoon. But so, yeah, that caught my eye, I think, because obviously the children that we work with or have worked with for a significant of our careers are those children that might be more likely to be sent to isolation rooms or whatever you might call them, or isolated. And there was, different perspectives on that, which was quite interesting, and how the difference we're talking about working with 10 schools across 3 years to develop their kind of inclusion strategies to reduce those isolations, use of isolations, or at least to use them in a more therapeutic way, potentially. So that caught my eye.
Yeah, and I think, you know me, I'm always big on data, and I like I like data. I like manipulating data. I like looking at the trends and seeing what the data tells us. You talked about having different data sets from different management information systems to come together to give us a better picture, because the data here is really caveated. It's quite specific to these schools who have chosen to record things in this way and who happen to use this management information system. And so every time you add another layer to that, you're effectively reducing the credibility of the data. And that concerns me a little, because I think, look, let's look at trends. We know that there are trends here. We know that there are increases here. We can see that. The data at, in its rawest form is telling us what's happening. But I don't think we should hang too much on the data. I think we should look more at the sources. Let's not look too much at the headline. Let's look more so at the practice.
That's it. And actually, Sam Strickland was quoted in the newspaper article, and I've gone to see Sam Strickland's school. He was really kind to allow me to come visit, and it was I think Sam Strickland would be perfectly open to say that he uses warm strict, and I wanted to see what that looks like. And actually, there was an amazing practice in the school. I really enjoyed my visit there, so thank you, Sam. I really appreciated that. But he spoke about when he went into his school as a head teacher, he changed how isolation was being used. Actually, it was used essentially, I think, previously as a dumping ground, and that children were just sent out of the class, and there was no kind of learning or kind of reparation work or supporting that child with their behaviour. It was just kind of get out of my class and go to isolation. So he has worked a lot on improving those kind of strategies, and you're one-to-one with a senior teacher in isolation. So you're doing work directly with that senior manager who presumably has a lot of experience, expertise in supporting children to make better kind of decisions. It didn't feel like, from what he was saying, is you're being punished, but how are we going to work to make this better place for all of our children? That was the sense that I got from what he was saying. And obviously I've seen his school, so I've got another kind of layer of understanding. Yeah, I think I'm with you. I want more information, because also there's a bit there, how can we dovetail it with looking at what other behavioural strategies are they using? So, for example, are they using isolation more, but they're suspending less? Or are both of those things quite high, and that the same children are experiencing isolation and suspensions and then potentially exclusions? So we know that, well, the isolations aren't necessarily working as an intervention. So I'd kind of like to, I want to dive deeper. I want to put in some other management information systems to kind of get a better understanding. I'm not quite a data geek like you, but I'm really interested in optimization of information.
Yeah, and on that, I think I've told you this, but from 2 different schools, when I have left those schools and moved on to other jobs, I have 2 I love Excel spreadsheet mugs.
Have you?
Yes, I do. People thought that was apt. They're probably very true. But yeah, I have 2 I heart Excel spreadsheets.
Oh. So if you ever leave Prusapp, is that the mug you want to get?
Well, let's go for the hat trick.
Yeah,
why not?
Absolutely. Well, you're not allowed to leave Prusapp.
No, I know. I've probably been told that a number of times. I think in this article, I agree with you. I think there are things in there. There are trends. We need to know a bit more. For me, it's one of those articles that comes round repeatedly. We hear the same thing over and again. We know this. There's nothing in here that comes as a surprise to us. We know there's good practice. We know there's poor practice. And, there's some good practice. There's a couple, including Sam's school. There's another example of a school in North London as well, where there are really good practice highlighted. For me, that's the issue we miss quite a lot. We miss highlighting the really good stuff and focus too much on the headline or the data just because an organization says we have this data. Well, that's great, but really that's where the narratives sort of spin out of control. And we know this. We talked about this previously about alternative provision. We've spent a career just battling poor narratives about alternative provision because of what some spurious data tells us. Once you take the data aside and you start looking at the really great practice and learn from the great practice, you can understand what's really happening. You can understand what's good about any sort of provision. I was going to say it's nice. Nice is a rubbish word, isn't it? But it's nice to see in this article that they're not packaging this in with my favourite phrase, which is internal alternative provision. There's no such thing as internal alternative provision, as we well know, and I'll jump on that hobby horse and shout about that as much as people
will. Would you like
listen.
to explain that a little bit? Because some people haven't heard your rant about it yet.
Well, okay. So if alternative provision is provision which is outside of mainstream provision but isn't special. It becomes a big umbrella term. So alternative provision, underneath that, you have all state-funded alternative provision, which includes pupil referral units, AP academies, AP free schools. It also includes state-funded hospital provision, which are usually pupil referral units or have academized, but your state-funded hospital provision. Alternative provision also includes any third-party external provision that you might buy into, and that includes unregulated provision as well.
And just to say that name has changed now, and
it has, yep,
now referred to as non-school AP.
Yeah, which I think is equally misleading.
Well, because some of them are working as education provision. So, yeah, we struggle, don't we, with how to categorise things. And I think it's a leviathan of kind of different provisions that become really difficult to kind of pull on the strand of what's actually similar about them.
It's always been a problem we've had. It's very difficult to define. But if you take that umbrella term, it does encompass a lot of things. Internal AP is a term that has been coined to cover an even larger kind of remit of the types of interventions that schools do to support a wide range of different needs, including special education needs, including behaviour, including reintegration. So what internal AP is basically a really lazy term. You can't have internal AP. It's not AP. It's your curriculum. It's the interventions within your curriculum. And the reason why I encourage colleagues to not use internal AP is because I've seen people fall foul of it with inspections. So what happens is an inspection team come in, they may or may not know much about alternative provision. And when a school says, or when a school is asked, do you use any alternative provision? And they say, well, we have an AP. What that then does is it sets the inspection team down a track of looking into that alternative provision. When what they actually mean is we have a room within our school where we do intervention work.
It's not even off-site direction because it's on-site. It's like on-site direction. If you could wave a magic wand, what would you call it? Would you call it any?
Well, we had a term for it 20 years ago. We called it alternative curriculum.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's what we'd call it. It would be the alternative curriculum pathways.
Yeah, and that's where I started in that sort of work in mainstream education. It was called the alternative curriculum, and it was alternative pathways. I mean, that's another phrase you can use, alternative pathways or pathways.
That's what I'm used to, actually. I hadn't thought about that. I'm used to the idea of alternative pathways or alternative curriculum pathways. It's not always alternative curriculum either, though. Sometimes it's the same curriculum but smaller, more nurturing. You know, those are the best ones, the ones that are smaller, more nurturing, more staffing to pupil ratio, and have clear pathways in and out. I think Absolutely. When you don't have clear pathways in and out, that's where it becomes problematic. But I suppose one of the things that the difference launched on Saturday in the conference that I was at was part of their working with 10 schools across 3 years to develop some of the strategies. And it'll be interesting to see sort of moving ahead what that might look like as well. And I suppose it kind of feeds into the inclusion agenda, which is the clear kind of way that the Department for Education is going and Ofsted's going in terms of inclusion and really focusing on that.
Just to finish your question, though, because you asked me what would I call it, and I gave you an umbrella term. When actually what I'd say is, and I've said this previously when people have asked me this question, don't call it anything lazy, just call it what it is. If it's an intervention centre, call it an intervention centre. If it's an outreach centre, call it an outreach centre. If it's a reintegration centre, call it that. So call it what it is, not give it an umbrella. Don't feel you've got to fit any kind of box that other people set on it. Name it for what it is and what it does within your own setting.
Well, interestingly, so Tom Bennett is quoted in the Lucas article and sees internal exclusion as a reset. So I wonder if it is about resetting it, do we just call it reset? Really, as you said, just do what it does, what it says on the tin.
And there are other things, aren't there? Reset, refocus, the engagement, all of these words are appropriate. But as I say, you use the words that's appropriate to your setting. So
the other thing that I've noticed this week, because I've been doing it, did a session today on the use of AI in pupil referral units and alternative provision. That was really interesting. And it kind of fed into another article I read about digital transformation as a priority and thinking about the use of AI. But it also brought me on to it's difficult to kind of ignore the news on Grok. Do you know much about that, Matt?
So my understanding on Grok, this is the AI which is part of X, or what was Twitter.
Yeah.
And I know that there are some free versions of it and there's a paid for version of it. Currently, the big issue, Ofcom have been told to very, very quickly investigate and come up with recommendation or action around Grok because of its ability to create pornography or to undress people. Am I right in saying that there was also a query over whether or not it could create child pornography?
Yeah, so I think there's been huge issues around the Grok and it being used as a tool for essentially digital sexual abuse. Let's kind of name it, do what it says on the tin, and it not being taken seriously at all, and women in particular being disproportionately vulnerable to this abuse, along with children, and the idea of those kind of deep fake sexual images of children and girls. And the retort and response from Elon Musk is, we just want to suppress free speech. I say we because I am anti it, and I assume you're anti it. And that this sense that actually women being treated and children being treated in this way, and it being visible, it being searchable, and it being normalised, kind of weaves in very kind of nicely about the violence against women and girls strategy agenda as well. And interestingly, Keir Starmer, I think it was Keir Starmer, said every parent should be able to trust that their daughter is safe at school. But actually, if we've got huge social media giants not taking the abuse of women seriously, then actually we are going to be fighting an uphill battle continually unless something is done quite robustly about how women are treated online and children. It's one of the reasons I very rarely use my children's names online. I call them A, I, O, I've missed someone, and Z. And I rarely share pictures with them online anymore beyond my kind of friends and family. But even Facebook is probably not safe. It's appalling. So that's one of the things that have caught my eye for various reasons.
And I believe there's been calls as well from Conservative Party to ban social media for anyone under the age of 16.
And Australia have done that, haven't they?
They have. And I don't necessarily fall out with that idea. I think you need to take a fairly measured approach. My concern here is, once again, though, that's the promotion of policy that protects the businesses, the companies. If you ban a person from accessing a service, you're almost shaming the person rather than trying to regulate those organizations that are creating the problems. I don't want to normalize it. I don't want to normalize this Grok story by saying, look, we've always had this. It's a little bit more explicit in terms of social media, but we have had these sorts of problems before, whereas the technology develops, those technological advances are used for nefarious means.
It's always the way.
It's a circle. It is, absolutely. But I think we have to get back to the idea of making those people responsible for the technological advances. We have the same problem with AI in terms of its impact on things like the music industry, film industry, television. I listen to AI experts who talk about how one day you will walk into your house, you will turn on a streaming service and you'll say, I want to watch a film starring Arnold Schwarzenegger set in the 1970s, action adventure film, and that streaming service's AI will create that movie for you. So it'll be a unique film to the description you give. You know, if you think about the things you can do with AI, then that's not actually that far-fetched. I think the technology to do it isn't really there yet, but I don't feel that that's a far-fetched idea at all. And that's worrying for industry.
I think as well. Yeah, so my older daughter really wants to do voiceover work. She has a beautiful voice, obviously I'm biased, but also she's very talented. But I've been trying to seek work experience for her, and I've been told actually that industry is disappearing because the use of AI has overtaken those voiceovers. You know, I listen to, there's podcasts, and there's one podcast I listen to in particular that I'm fairly sure is AI in terms of his delivery. And I've been using Notebook LM, and it's incredible. It's really, really interesting where I've actually fed it information about the violence against women and girls strategy. I've put in 2 different sources of information. It has created a podcast of 2 people talking about the violence against women and girls strategy. Now, part of that is great because it saves me time. I'm going to get the train tomorrow to Northamptonshire. I can put that on, listen to it, not have to read, be a bit lazy about it. Or if I was driving, I could just listen to it. But there's also something there about that I'm a passive recipient to the news and what's happening. And how do we make sure that we have a deeper understanding of things rather than this kind of overlaid hyper reality of someone telling me what they think are the main points of this strategy? There is that kind of dumbing down of information. But I love AI. And I think AI does a lot. But I think having that human touch and that artistry is incredibly important. Losing that is losing a little bit of humanity almost, isn't it?
Yeah. And I'm going to be slightly hypocritical here because we use a tool to produce this podcast, which uses AI. I did a degree in radio, film and television, in a degree that was both analog and digital. So I did analog editing of chopping up 35mm film and splicing it back together, a very traditional technique to filmmaking. Yet I also did sort of non-linear video editing using computers as well. So I have both backgrounds to that. So not to say I'm a skilled editor, but I certainly have the experience of editing that I've used in the past. For the purposes of what we produce here, the system we use does the editing for us. It cuts out some of the waffle, of which we know there is quite a bit of it because we often get into that. It cuts out things for us. For example, if I start talking to an aside and say, I don't think someone's working or your microphone's not working correctly, it highlights that within and asks me if it wants to just remove that for me. So it does the production part for me that normally somebody would do. So hypocritically, I'm just talking there about creative industry. Yeah, I'm using more so for time, because if I was to sit and put this together in the way that this system automates it for me, the AI flips between you and I, cuts backwards and forwards, highlights the speaker. If I was to do that personally, that would take me days, yet it does it in minutes. So I think that's where AI can be a very personal tool, but I don't think it should be something that is used to replace artists, And you talked there about a personal learning tool, effectively, where you've taken an AI where you can feed it information, it creates a podcast for you to listen to. That shouldn't be the norm for the production of podcasts, because it really does need a human touch. It really does need content that's real. But it's good for you because it saves your time.
Saves me time. And I think, so those that are listening may or may not know, I write children's books and my artist in residence, Baz, illustrates them. They're beautiful. And I've just made contact with a lovely man who is going to look at how we're displaying them and the layouts and so on to professionalize them for formal publication. I'm really excited about it. Having an artist who creates a character, I know that I could get AI to do that. But there is something about the heart of it that you lose. And it also goes through several stages. So Baz will draw the illustrations, we'll comment, we'll talk back and forth about it until we feel it's right. I will write things and then I print it out and then I read them to my children and I see what my children's reactions are to them, and reading them out loud gives you another layer of actually the rhythm isn't quite right, and I'm reading it to my children and their interactions with it, and then I redraft it and change it. So I think there's those bits that need to be taken into account as well, that sometimes I think AI can present it as if it's a finished product, but there's more layers of creativity with the human touch that's really important. So I think there's all those kind of elements. But I use AI all the time. It's a great tool, but there are risks inherent in it. But also people have the power to be able to ameliorate those risks. And if they don't take the abuse of women and children seriously, then why would they ameliorate it? I think there's an element that home is not just your family anymore. It's also social media, which doesn't help. And I'm quite open about this. And I know that some of the people listening to this will know that I was sexually assaulted by a physiotherapist on 2 occasions. And so I've gone through that process of going through the Healthcare Professional Council to get him struck off before then going to court and giving evidence against him, along with, I think it was 6 other women who are incredible. And he targeted me because I have mental health issues. And so I read the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, and there's lots of things around 3 new lots of £11 million training and support programs for schools to stamp out misogyny. But actually, I was assaulted by a 40-year-old man. We need to also be working at that kind of top level. I know that person who's currently in prison doesn't care that he assaulted me. He doesn't recognise that he assaulted me. He pleaded not guilty and put us all through that process of giving evidence through court and being cross-examined. But I also know about how I was treated by the barrister who asked if I felt like an idiot during cross-examination and so on.
Can I ask, just to interrupt, why did he say that? What was his meaning behind?
Because I didn't tell him to stop, because I didn't realise it happened to me until afterwards. Yeah. I've written a blog about it.
No, and it highlights it's victim shaming.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Interestingly, I understand that the jury were pretty appalled by the way that he asked me questions, and I turned to the judge and I said, "Can I answer that candidly?" And he said yes, and I did answer it very candidly. I was also accused, ironically, of only pursuing this and making the allegation because I wanted money. I was absolutely furious about that. I'm just holding my anger and my fury. I am, and some people might know that you can request compensation, which I've done. I think I requested compensation 3 years ago and they still haven't dealt with it. Yet I'm paying from my own pocket for private psychology and psychiatric support. So when it talks about things like supporting the support for victims, well, that's great. But what about the victims now, today, not the victims that are going to happen in the future, which of course we should, you're not addressing the people that have been hurt and assaulted today. And actually my MP has been really, really supportive and she's following that up as well. But even this bit around the relentless pursuit of perpetrators, I do think we need like a two-pronged attack. We're talking about education, we're talking about the pursuit of perpetrators, but then we have to be robust about the social media channels as well. We cannot be accepting of viewing women's sense of self through photographs as something that can be violated and exploited. I think it's as simple as that.
Real aside here, there was a thing that happened, and I don't know if it was today, but I've seen it on social media today. And it was on one of the morning breakfast shows, and you had the male presenter was in an ice bath, and he pulled Kate Garraway into the ice bath with him. And you watch it, and I've seen it framed on social media as, what do we think of this? And it's kind of like, well, obviously that feels immediately inappropriate, but even more so because on social media, you've presented it as, how do we feel about this? Well, you know how we feel about it. We all feel quite uncomfortable about it. Yet at the same time, there'll be other people saying, well, it's just a prank, it's just a laugh. And unfortunately, social media has kind of compounded the idea of banter and pranks and almost made it legitimate, because so much of what we see on social media is funny or is intended to be funny. And because you can create a real diverse opinion on something very quickly on social media, it's very interesting to go, look, this is not what you're saying it is at all.
Interestingly, I'm going to kind of push my book now, because why on earth not? I've got my own podcast, so I'm allowed to do that. The questions for early careers, questions on behaviour, a guide for early careers teachers, that's going to be published by Routledge. I've nearly got all of my contributions in, but one of them from Richard Clutterbuck is this idea about banter, and when does banter hit into kind of not appropriate? And he talks about different approaches that he's used within his school when he was a head teacher, but also how do you tackle misogyny and how do you do that? So buy my book is what I'm saying, then you'll get all the answers. But in all seriousness, it is about how do we all work together? So you as a father teaching your boys, me as a mother to girls as well, and going, actually, one of my phrases to my older daughter is, be proud of the space that you take up. Because I think often as not, we are taught as women to be quiet, to be small, to be passive. Now, that's not to say that men aren't victims of assaults and violence as well. And we have to bear those men as well and make sure that they have the confidence and to be able to report what happens to them, because it shouldn't happen to anyone. But we also know that women are more likely to be targeted. How do we make sure that women feel able to stand up and make their voices heard? Also, how do you make sure that your boys know how to call out poor behaviour of others without it being, oh, we're just being silly. Oh, we're just playing.
I think that's one of the hardest things to do, is to call out the behaviour of others, either to someone or to them, or to the person who's the perpetrator of that behaviour. I took offence at something. It's slightly different, and I don't want to steal the limelight from the conversation around
No, it's fine.
around violence against women, but I I took offence to a comment that was made on a sort of a group chat by a mum about the dads, and it was photographs of a birthday party, and the comment was about how, isn't it great to see the men getting involved for a change at these sorts of events? And I took great offence to that, because as a parent, I take responsibility for my children. I'm not a babysitter. I'm not,
No.
oh, can you look after your children while your wife's out? No, actually, I can do quite well, thank you. I get my children to school, collect my children, I can feed them. I can do all these things independently because I'm an adult and I'm a parent, and I take my role as parent really, really seriously. But when you see that, you often, and this is where I often see kind of sexism and parent commentary colliding, is this idea of dads not being able to do it just because they're dads. And I think that's
Yeah,
quite
and
insulting to
it is
quite a
insulting.
wide group of people.
But also it reaffirms the idea that men can't be kind of caring and nurturing roles and those sorts of things. And interestingly, one of the strategies about the violence against women and girls is to try and get more men into teaching. Now, part of me appreciates that, but I think actually perhaps we need more women in senior leadership positions. I think maybe we should turn that on its head a little bit, rather than just considering men into teaching, because men do go into teaching, but obviously a lot less, but they are more likely to be in senior leadership positions. And we have to ask the question, why is that? And that's because often we have an assumption that men aren't as capable of looking after their children when you are just as capable. When I go away to different countries, I am frequently asked, who is looking after your children? Their dad is
Their
looking
father.
after their children. Yeah,
Absolutely.
their dad. Just like when he goes and does work abroad, his wife is looking after their children, but he's never asked that question. Never.
No. Just out of interest, that particular thing you referred to there about needing to increase the number of men in teaching, is that specific to any part of the teaching sector? Because I think that there's
Early
a
years,
kind
I
of
think, in particular, in primary.
Yeah, because in my head immediately, I think to primary, and I think, in any primary school I can think of, the ratio is much more heavily weighted female to male, and yet when you go into secondary, it's probably a little more balanced, if not more males, but there's certainly more balance in secondary education than there is in primary. And I wonder if there's still work to do in attracting men to primary education, because again, it's a little bit like the pink and blue aisles in any toy store. Yeah, I think we still have that a little bit in some job roles as well. I think the blue aisle has disappeared mostly. I wish we'd just get rid of the pink aisle now.
I dress my daughters in any colours, and it's interesting that people are curious about it, but it's just like, well, they were going to puke and vomit over any colour. It didn't really matter.
What does it matter?
What does it matter? They're going to vomit and poo all over it anyway. Yeah, I mean, less so now.
And I take great pride in the fact that my son, he's 10 years old now, and he'd hate me for saying this, but when he was very little and he learnt that he was getting a baby brother, he wanted a baby doll and a pram, and he's got a pink pram, and we still have these. And actually, I wouldn't get rid of them. We've kind of put them away with some of the older toys, but he absolutely loved this baby doll and this pink pram, because for him that was a representation. And we used to go everywhere. He wanted to wheel the pram around when we went out, and he loved that baby doll. He'd be totally embarrassed to talk about that now, because the sort of the peer pressure that he gets from school. My children won't even wear on a day, sort of like going to a party or going into school where they wear their own clothes. They've got pink shirts, pink t-shirts, but they won't wear them into school, wear them with their friends, because unfortunately other children, not my children, but other children still perceive that as, well, you can't wear pink because you're a boy. And that's coming from somewhere. Now, again, that's not to shame or blame parents, but that is coming from somewhere.
I think it's wider than parents. It's both the kind of primary and secondary socialisation, isn't it? About what is appropriate play and activities and how we treat them and so on. My girls have a tool set, they have a doctor set, they also have a kitchen, they've got everything. I try not to be narrow, and it's hard to do, but I do wonder, so the violence against women and girls strategy is, how do we involve parents in those conversations? Because we know that it's wrong to do X, Y, Z, and people still make the decision to do the wrong thing. And is that an education issue? It's a wider thing, isn't it? I mean, education is just one part of that prong. But I'm pleased that it's been taken seriously. But I hope that the current victims of assault aren't forgotten with the drive to stop future victims, I suppose.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And that goes back to your point, which is we can educate the future, but what are we doing about the now? What are we doing about the adults now where they are a risk or women are vulnerable right now, as you were? Yes, great. We can talk to our children, we can talk to our boys. We can try to protect the future, but we have to do something to change the here and now.
Yeah. We got quite dark, didn't we?
Did a little.
Okay.
Let's talk about what would Jean-Luc Picard do?
He's a bit inappropriate, I think.
Jean-Luc Picard?
So, Beverly Crusher, for years and years and years, there is something between those two. He came and told her that her husband was dead. Yet he still carries a torch for her, doesn't he?
So I feel like I've missed all this part. By the way, this is all staying in, by the way.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Do you not feel that he carries a torch?
Jean-Luc Picard for Beverly
Crusher, yeah.
There's definitely something there, and then and which creates the very odd relationship between him and Will
Wesley.
Wheaton's character. Yes,
Wesley.
There's an odd relationship, isn't there, early on?
Yes, a fatherly, but not fatherly, because he wouldn't want to overstep the mark.
Yeah, where he's trying to do the right thing, isn't quite doing it, and Wesley isn't quite accepting of it. And I get that. Okay, yes, I get that.
Okay, what would Worf think about the violence against women and girls strategy?
I mean, he'd probably be leading the charge, wouldn't he?
What was his character? Was it his son Alexandra? Was that his name? The son?
Oh, you're getting so deep into things I wouldn't even know now.
So am I out geeking you?
Yeah, well, you see, Star Trek, whilst I've enjoyed Star Trek, whilst I do enjoy it, I mean, I enjoy science fiction generally. I don't feel I've ever been overly into the detail of it. I've probably been more so into the detail of something like Star Wars than Star Trek.
Yes,
I don't like that subscription. You have to subscribe to one and not the other. I don't like that idea because that's just a nonsense to me. You can like one more than the other. You can prefer one more than the other. Okay.
I didn't watch Star Wars until I was in my 30s.
I think this is a thing that a lot of people have experienced. You either got it when you were younger, or you pick it up much later.
Yeah, I picked it up when I was later, so I can't. Yeah, I don't know much about Star Wars at all. I think Jean-Luc Picard would want an egalitarian society, and he would be all up for women to be in high positions of authority and power. But having said that, the makeup of his bridge and the kind of is predominantly male. However, they tried to change that, didn't they? Had Tasha Yar initially before she died. Sorry if that's a spoiler, but it was like 30 years ago now. So you're going to have to
We've said this. If it's that long ago, it's like I said
to you. It's probably over 30 years ago that Tasha Yar dies by some weird black slime. So she lived on a very misogynistic, very awful, violent planet. That's why she became a security officer.
And I think Star Trek bridges get better at diversity as they go on, don't they?
Yeah, I think so. I think generally speaking, yeah, they've become, well, I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? So actually one of the things that I noticed at Included Ed on Saturday was that there was a real diversity of speakers from ethnic groups, from gender and so on. And that was really heartening because often we talk about inclusion and we forget that it's not just about special educational needs and about proportionality and representation and how we represent the different groups. So, I feel... and that's not always visible either, because we know that diversity is beyond the visible. But I did like the fact that they really thought about actually it matched the communities that we serve. That was really powerful, I thought.
That's good. So anything geeky that has caught your eye this week?
I've been collecting feathers this week, and I collect feathers, and I found I was really excited. I went to deliver a session on behaviour in Croydon, and on the floor there was a feather. And it was a woodcock, which is quite unusual. And I was really, really excited. So I am now a proud owner of a woodcock feather. That was my best. You
keep these in a kind of a scrapbook?
I keep them in a beautiful scrapbook, which I will show next week when I've got time and capacity. And I've got feathers from around the world that I've just found on the floor. So from Uganda, from Zambia, from England, from Kazakhstan, I'm going back to Zambia in March, so I'll hopefully collect a couple more feathers. And I'm going back to Kazakhstan in April, so hopefully that will fill up my book a little bit. So yeah, if any listeners find feathers but find them, don't like hurt animals or anything, then please feel free to send them to Matt, who will share his address with everybody.
Can we just pick up on what you said there? You said about feathers not hurt animals. Can we pick up the occasion where you FaceTime me from another country because there was some beautiful feathers on the floor? However, they were attached to a dead bird.
It was a kingfisher.
Yes.
And they're so rare to find, and it was already dead. And it was really gross. And I'm a strict vegetarian as well. And in order to distract me, I asked Matt to talk about Ofsted just to kind of numb my brain from just plucking a couple of blue feathers. It was pretty disgusting. I did the same thing yesterday.
It didn't stop you from sending me photos of said dead bird.
I tell you what, after this, I'll send you a picture of another dead bird that was in my house.
Thank you. I appreciate
it was a female chaffinch that I had to do the same thing. And I actually said to my husband, I was like, I might ring Matt so he can distract me. But I didn't ring you. That's how kind I was to you. Any geeky things have caught your interest, Matt, now that you've kind of outed me as a weirdo?
So again, going back to sort of TV and things, Stranger Things is finished. And as I said, I'm going to clarify something I said previously. I said I doubted that I liked Stranger Things. And I didn't really fully explain that in a previous episode. The reason I doubted it was because people were telling me it's not as good as it is. Now, what's true is the early series, which has that kind of Spielberg-esque 80s adventure, tinged with a bit of horror. It's really, that's what brought me to it. And it's really, really kind of exciting. And it loses that by the time it gets towards the end. What I'd say of the end is, when I got to the end, I was glad it was all over. Not in a, I'm glad they finished this in terms of I'm done with it, but in a...
Okay, but you like the way that it ended.
I'm okay with the way that it ended. A lot of people aren't. It's created real division in terms of the way that it ends. And without any spoilers, let's just say there's a question that is left unanswered at the end. And so that ambiguity in the question is what people are debating. And it is all over the internet, all over social media, just back and forward debate on the answer to this question. The reality is the answer doesn't matter. And so people can go on debating it for as long as they want. It really doesn't matter. So it's one of those things where I'm kind of content because, and I was thinking about this earlier in the car and journey into work, finales of TV programs are notoriously difficult to do well. So I think limited series do them quite well because it's a limited series and you're working towards a resolution. Absolutely. You finish the arc, you get to the end of that story. And it all kind of makes sense. And you can keep doing twist upon twist and, revelation right to the end, and it's okay. And you can leave on a cliffhanger in a limited series, and that's fine because you know it's finite because there's only 5 episodes or 8 episodes of this. So you accept it. When you have a sort of a long form series and you have multiple series, when you finally get to the end, doing the end, as we know, can be quite challenging. And I mean, I've experienced lots of things where they either do it very, very badly or the show gets cancelled and it doesn't get a proper resolution, things like that. Firefly, and exactly the one that was in my head, Firefly.
Absolutely.
Firefly needs another 3 series, really, or needed another 3 series. And even the film, whilst the film gives a little bit of resolution, you've never seen
I haven't seen the film. No, I haven't brought myself to see it.
So you should, because it's great for all the reasons that Firefly is great. And it's got some really beautiful long shots of the characters moving around the ship. I think there's one really long continuous shot at the start.
It's a bit like West Wing, where it's walking to the West Wing.
Absolutely. And it's good. And if you loved Firefly, you'll enjoy the film. But yeah, doing finales is notoriously challenging, I think. And I can think of endless TV programs where they just don't get it right. The thing about Stranger Things is it has a really lengthy epilogue. I think it's like 45, 50-minute epilogue to the finale, because the finale is 2 hours, the final episode, which was released on New Year's Day. The epilogue, okay, you have to trudge. It feels like you're trudging through it a little bit, but it does everything it should do for the casual viewer and also for the fan. And it does a lot for the actors as well, I think. So it's about trying to please everybody. And it's fine. It's what it is. It never hits the highs of the first couple of series, but once you pass series 3, it probably doesn't do that anyway. And I think that's why I've kind of come to the point where it goes, it's okay that it's ended there. That's the right thing to do. But I just thought, because this is notorious in sci-fi. Is there anything you can think of where the ending, without necessarily spoiling the ending, but where the final kind of resolutions the one that I can think of, which people always come back to, is Lost. And I don't know if you ever watched Lost.
That was awful. But
the ending is left to be ambiguous. Yeah, but it's not even ambiguous. It's been explained afterwards with this is everybody meeting up in the afterlife.
It's just tedious. It's a really tedious ending.
Really, you might as well have had them all waking up from a dream.
Yeah, it was absolutely a waste of my life.
Yeah,
and that's one of the reasons. If somebody recommends a series to me, I ask them what other things they like, because if Lost is in their top 5, then I'm not going to take their judgments particularly seriously. I'm thinking of lots of. See, I'm not just thinking of sci-fi. I'm thinking of Deadwood, for example. Deadwood, it really builds up to a crescendo.
I've never seen it. And
I feel like I should. Good. Yeah. It's really good. Really good. Like, don't watch it with your children. Like, really inappropriate. I recommend Deadwood lots. Have you seen Boardwalk Empire?
No, again, one where
I think things I've ever seen in a TV series.
I think I've seen the first episode, but never really. There's lots of episodes, lots of TV programs around that same sort of time where I've watched the start and never. Right,
this is what we're going to do. You've got homework. Can you start with Deadwood? It's amazing. And are you going to recommend Stranger Things to me to watch?
Actually, I'm going to recommend something different to you.
Okay, I've got my pen.
I'm going to recommend to you, I think I've told you about this before, but I'm going to recommend to you, because I think it's not necessarily your genre, but it's the content that's important. So, right, bear with me.
Okay.
It is a romantic comedy.
Okay, this already sucks, but okay.
Thank you. I knew you'd say that. And it's called Nobody Wants This.
Nobody Wants This, okay.
And it's all about a relationship between a rabbi.
Brilliant.
And I'm not sure she's got a denomination actually within it. I don't think it's ever really kind of ascertained. She's not Jewish. So the female character isn't Jewish. He's a rabbi. And it's a comedy, and it's got a fantastic cast. And it's all about how this relationship. What I think is really good about that you'll like is a representation of the Jewish faith.
Okay, I will watch.
And I think that's why I say content over genre. I think you will like the way that the Jewish faith is not ridiculed. It presents so many set pieces, and obviously it's part of the central conflict, because you've got this guy and this affects his job, but in a way that is not presented in a way where that is the problem. It's presented in a way where society is the problem. So I think the representation of faith in that is because it's not actually that religious a program at all. So
for our next episode, we'll be reporting back on Deadwood and Nobody Wants This.
There you go. I like this. This is a good little.
This is good. I like this. I'm actually thinking I'm getting the train tomorrow, and I might be able to download some episodes on the iPad and watch it on the train.
By the way, it's a really easy watch. They're like 25-minute episodes.
Brilliant. Perfect.
So it's quite, you could whiz through it really, really quickly actually. But I'd be interested to see what you think, because the sort of the romantic comedy part, and here's why you should also watch it. The central female and her sister are doing a podcast. So
this is homework on homework. There's many layers here.
Yeah,
fabulous.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. I think that brings us to an end.
It does. I think we've covered education
at night as well. Yeah, covered education, done a bit of geeky, set homework as educators. That's important. We've gone from everything, abuse to Star Trek to random series.
I think what would be good if we've had quite a lot of people engage with episodes and into the comments talk about things. So here's something that I think would be good for people to engage in. We talked about terrible finales. What's your best worst finale?
Okay. Yeah, what's your best worst finale? It doesn't have to be sci-fi genre either. If you hated the end of Sopranos, for example, you can whack that in. It's fine. So
what's your best worst finale? That would be something we'd be interested to talk to you about in the comments.
I'm Sarah Johnson.
And I'm Matt Morris. And we have nothing to bring.